Good morning, everyone, and welcome. As the voice of God just said, my name is Matt Largen, President and CEO for Williamson, Inc., and welcome to our second annual Outlook Williamson event. We're grateful you all took the time to be here today. I appreciate it. I want to especially say thank you to my parents who are here, Jerry and Judith Largen. Thank you for coming this morning. I appreciate it. They deserve far more than applause for raising me, I can assure you. So thanks for coming. And this is the point where I'll point out to the panelists as well. My parents are here. So for the person in the audience who both hired me and has traveled across the country with me, Janet Miller, please be nice during your panel presentation. Thanks. We have a terrific program lined up today, but first I want to thank the companies that made today possible, starting with our presenting sponsor, Skanska. I want to welcome to the stage my friend and Skanska's Vice President for Business Development, Mindy Mazzo, who will talk about what Skanska means to Williamson County and to Middle Tennessee. Mindy? Yep.
Good morning. I didn't realize Matt's parents were going to be here, so I'll go off script just a little bit. I'm Vice President of Business Development for Skanska, but before we talk about our company, I just want to say congratulations on another great event to Matt and his team at Williamson, Inc. And the trivia question is, does anybody know what Nickelback, Kenny Chesney, and Matt Largen have in common? Janet Miller, would you happen to know the answer to that question? They've all had sold-out events in the last week here locally. So, all right, way to go, Matt. So Skanska is thrilled to be part of Outlook Williamson. Skanska is an international construction management firm. Our headquarters is based in Sweden. Our local office is right over in Meridian here in Franklin. We have 75 construction team members that work out of our office here locally, and we make all of our decisions on our projects here at the local level. We've got a long history of building in Williamson County. I've been with the company for about 19 years, and when I started, we were working on several projects over in Maryland Farms. We built 6 of the buildings there. We also built the Cool Springs Conference Center, which many of you frequent, I know. Most people know that we were involved with the building of the Nissan headquarters, and that was a great project, great economic impact here in Williamson County. And then currently, we're thrilled to be finishing up the new Children's Hospital at Williamson Medical Center. That's been a great project for us. It's a great project for the county. Some of the other things we're doing right now, we're doing some work with Synergy Bank, we're doing some work at BGA, and then just north of here, we're working on the redevelopment of the West Riverfront in downtown Nashville. And then I'm sure everybody heard the announcement on Friday of the great momentum we have going with the redevelopment of the old convention center with Pat Emery and Buck Halterwanger and Gresham Smith. So excited about those projects. Also doing a lot of work for HCA around the country, including their project in the Gulch. So we're thrilled to be here. Look forward to a great event this morning. And again, thanks for being here. And Matt, congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you. It's really nice. Thanks. I appreciate that. Great. Thanks, Mindy. I really appreciate that, and thanks for the kind words as well. And really, this event wouldn't be possible without the great staff with the Williamson, Inc., too. They've done a tremendous job. Our signature events are made possible with the generous support of these outstanding corporate citizens that understand the importance of investing in our community. During the break today, or after the meeting, please stop by their display tables, or in the case of the TMA group, their new commuter van right outside, and show your support. Right at this point, I want to thank our friends at Brentwood Academy, the Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority, Transportation Management Association, or the TMA Group, Vanderbilt Health, and Williamson Medical Center. I also want to extend a special thank you to the people who probably brought you here today, our media partners, which include Channel 4 WSMV, Homepage Media Group, Williamson Herald, and Your Williamson Magazine. This event would not look as great as it does if not for the great audiovisual sponsor, Edema Partners and AP Live, so thanks for that. RJ Young for the Trends Report, which you have in front of you at your table. Our accommodations provided by the Hilton Garden Inn, and our plant sponsor, Green Resources. Please join me today in thanking all of our sponsors. You all have a copy of the Williamson County Trends Report at your seat, the one I'm holding up right here. This report won awards last year from both the Southern Economic Development Council and the International Economic Development Council, and I know it spent the last year in countless reception areas across the county and across the region. It includes vital information about Williamson County's current economy and projected trends 10 and 20 years out. I want to thank two people on the staff that did amazing work on this, putting this great report together. That's Amanda Murray and Jennifer Scharbach. Thank you so much for the work that you all did putting this together. This year's report is organized around three key areas for Williamson County: education, housing, and transportation. These issues are interrelated, and how we address them in the future and today will determine what kind of county we leave for our kids and our grandkids. Before we go on, I want to mention for those of you that are tweeting that our hashtag is Outlook 2015. So I assume if you're down on your phones, you're tweeting and not paying attention. So just make sure you use the hashtag when you tweet. So we're going to spend the morning examining the Williamson County economy in depth, learn about where we've been, how we got here, and most importantly, where we're headed. We get a chance to hear from experts in their respective fields, including our first speaker, who advises companies on where to locate their operations across the country. Three people who have and will continue to change the landscape of both Williamson County and Middle Tennessee. And we'll get a chance to hear how 5 global megatrends affect business right here in Middle Tennessee and Williamson County. So let's dive right in. Perfect. So when we asked business leaders across the county, what are the top 10 issues facing Williamson County? These are the ones that they identified. Affordable housing, roads, and schools were the top 3 issues that they identified. That shouldn't come as a big surprise. What's really interesting about this particular study is that it was done 20 years ago. This is actually from 1995, and the Williamson County Chamber of Commerce put this together 20 years ago. So what that says is we've been dealing with these same issues for decades because we've been in growth mode as a county at least since the late 70s. How can we be sure that this is from 20 years ago? Because at that point, the definition of an affordable house was about $68,000. So some things stay the same, other things have changed drastically. I think it's important, too, when we talk about the Williamson County economy, and frankly, any local economy, we put this in perspective of what's happening from a national standpoint. And this shouldn't come as any surprise today. So if you look at recent surveys about asking people to rate the conditions of the current economy, basically you have almost 2 to 1 people think we're on the wrong track. Almost 2 to 1 people think the economy is getting worse nationally. And it's interesting, in a time where unemployment rate actually going down, the perceptions of how things are going out there are not really well. But then you take that versus what people think about Williamson County, according to a survey that we did, and you'll notice that when we asked people, how would you rate the Williamson County economy, it was almost entirely excellent or good. In fact, there was a 5% increase in excellent from 2015. So I think this is the, hey, let's be grateful of what we got slide, because we know that of a lot of places across the country, there hasn't really been that great a recovery. So I think, we're really fortunate to deal with the kind of issues we have around growth because we have a very strong economy, especially as you look at what's happening nationwide. And I also think it's important at this point to look at perspective about who really makes up the Williamson County economy. And I would say this is probably true throughout the country. It's that small business, the 1 to 4 employees. Those are what really drive the economy. And you'll hear from a lot of different people, speakers today. We'll talk about large corporations, and certainly that's an important part of the ecosystem. But the base of this economy, the base of the economy across the country are really those small businesses. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. And we know most of our members of this organization are small business, and those are really the drivers of the economy moving forward. Interesting to look at our workforce. I mentioned earlier about the low unemployment rate. We typically run about 1 point to 2 points below the national average at 4.4%. We had 1,500 new business permits issued last year in Williamson County, strong entrepreneurial activity. But the one stat that really jumps out to me in this, and you may have heard this before, is the fact that of all the companies on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing company lists across the state of Tennessee, 33% are in one county, and that's Williamson County, which is it's amazing. 95 counties in Tennessee. I think that absolutely deserves an applause. We have some great companies in Williamson County. We have some great minds in Williamson County who have started and grown these business. And I know the past 4 years, we've been at about 25%. This last year, we were at 33%. So that's a really strong bellwether for where this economy is headed with all the startup activity in Williamson County. So who are we from a demographic standpoint? I think the numbers that stand out for me the most on this page is the fact that 54% of our workforce has at least a bachelor's degree. That's 2% higher than the last time we ran these numbers last year. And also, too, this is what really shocked us last year when we ran the numbers, that 49% of the residents actually came from a different state. Not just a different county, but a different state, which is why it's important for us always to make sure we're welcoming to people who come from the outside. Next. So migration, we talk about migration a lot. I think it's a really powerful number because people vote with their feet. It means that people still view Williamson County as a land of opportunity. And what this particular chart shows is the fact that over the last 5 years, it shows where people are moving from to Williamson County. And you can see the states. You've got California, Florida, New York, but these are actually the cities where people are moving to the most from in the last 5 years. Tampa, Orlando, Los Angeles, Muncie, St. Louis. I think it's great. And I would say everybody in this room probably has or have heard of a story of someone, one of your neighbors, friends that have moved here for opportunity. I had a chance to go to the Williamson County Fine Arts Festival this weekend, and I met a couple from New York who have moved here to start Mathnasium, a math tutoring and learning center. The gentleman went to Vanderbilt, and they just wanted to move here because of the experience he had, and we'll talk about that later, too, as well. Also, very smart people. The first thing they did when they moved here was join the chamber, so it's really, I know, that's how I know they're smart people. So, the point to this is people who relocate here like to know they're not the first ones to ever do it, and they also like to know that they're not alone. Our first speaker has worked in a number of these cities from this slide and is very familiar to Tennessee as one of the project leads for the recent Under Armour Distribution Center project in Wilson County that will eventually employ 1,500 people. Amy Gerber is an executive vice president in the Business and Economic Incentive Practice, a consulting division of Jones Lang LaSalle. She specializes in state incentive and tax negotiation and implementation. Amy has led and managed numerous multi-state incentive negotiation engagements for both office and industrial projects for clients that include Williams-Sonoma, CVS, Pacific Sunwear, Miller Coors, Medtronic, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Capital One, Cisco, Halliburton, and Bed Bath & Beyond. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting from Montana State and is a board member with the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. Amy is a top producer within Jones Lang LaSalle and was recently had a project deal receive Deal of the Year in Atlanta. Please help me in welcoming today's keynote speaker and my friend to the stage, Amy Gerber. Amy.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. I don't always get the chance to come to a community that's thriving the way you are. Most of my speaking engagements are with communities who really need some help and some guidance. So it's nice to be here to talk about some of the positive attributes you have and how you're going to continue to grow and be so successful. As Matt said, my name is Amy Gerber. I'm with JLL. I'm officed in Atlanta, and my specialty is on the business and economic incentive side. So we spend a lot of time all across the country helping companies evaluate where to put my next investment, both in capital and employment. So there's a few topics that I wanted to go through today, and these are very macro level at this point. But what factors are site selectors and companies evaluating these days? And a lot of these are going to be very obvious to you, but what we're going to talk about is how do those change through the years? Take a step back and understand really what is site selection and what is risk and how are they related? What is the importance of workforce? One of the things that Williamson County has that Matt just pointed out is a tremendous workforce. You don't see educational attainment levels like that in many places in the country. What are some of the changes in the client expectations that we have? At the end of the day, my clients are your clients too. They're the companies bringing these jobs. And how have we seen competitiveness increase, especially from a local level? And what are some new trends that communities are employing in order to attract these new projects? So one of the tools that we use to evaluate different markets are some of the tools that you see here. So Area Development Magazine, as you probably know, they issue annually a report where they poll a number of CEOs and CFOs from companies all across the U.S., and they ask them, what are your most important site selection factors? So for 2014, this is a list of their top 20. So very obvious things that you would think about. But what's interesting is how they rank on that chart. So highway accessibility, that's always been there. I'm going to show you some slides in a few minutes that shows that 10 years ago, that was the number one option, number one site selector as well. One of the interesting things to me is number 3, 4, and 5, which is available land, available buildings, and then availability of skilled labor. Typically, we don't see a big emphasis on real estate this high in the rankings. So it's very interesting to me that within the last year, that's become a big focus, which is great news for our partners with Skanska, because people are out there, they want to build, they need real estate, and they understand how important that is. So now that you've seen those site selection factors, let's take a step back and just understand, why do we have those factors? Why do we think they rank the way they did? So if we take a look at site selection, what is site selection? Why do we go through the site selection process? And the reason is that site selection is really the mitigation of risk on a business's P&L when they're evaluating capital investment and employment, right? We can put jobs anywhere in this country, but some markets have more risk than others. Some have risk that we can bear, and others have risk that we can't take on. And that's why we go through this process. It's a tool to funnel down to that preferred market where we're going to be the most successful. So within risk, we have financial and we have non-financial. So some of that we can control from your perspective, and some of that we cannot control. So if we take a look at risk, we have risk on the P&L. First of all, as you know, when a company is making a decision to grow, they're typically doing it ahead of actually having the need. Because if they wait till they have the need, it's going to take them 12, 18 months to get the facility up and running and staffed, so now they're behind the ball. So they're going to spend this money today in hopes of making new revenues 2 years from now. The capital assets that we're employing, which include our employees, will be the most underutilized they'll ever be at this point in time, because they're training, they're coming online. Our depreciation is the highest. So we have all this outflow of cash right away and no revenue to match it. So that's why we're trying to mitigate risk. When we look at timing, this is where our local partners become very involved. We have real estate timing. Real estate timing can kill a deal. If you can't get permits, if you can't get zoning, if you can't get the land pulled together, if you can't do that fast enough, somebody else will. And that's a risk that we have on our P&L that we have to mitigate through this process. But one of the most important risks we're trying to mitigate is the employment risk. What happens if we go into a market, we want to create 300 jobs, and 2 years later, we can't fill those jobs? Well, we're in a big pickle, because we've come out all this money, we can't get our money back, and we still don't have a facility that's performing. So employment, even though that was not at the top of that list, is number one. I bet you when a CFO takes a look at his P&L, that's a big risk that he has on his plate. So just to remind you where labor stood at in the 2014 list, that was 5, 6, and 7. And I put 7 in there with the right to work. With the changes in legislation all across the country in states like Michigan and Indiana, this has become a very important success factor. And obviously you're very familiar with the right to work issues that Tennessee has faced and defeated last year. So when we look at labor availability and cost, those are critical components regardless of the facility. You would think that this only applies to my headquarters or back offices, but that's not true. When we did the Under Armour deal, one of the ways we came to our top 5 markets was through a labor analysis. And you would think, oh, I can get distribution labor anywhere, but that's not true. We need skill sets, we need it for the right price as well. So today, what's interesting that we didn't really have 7, 10 years ago is the ability to pull data from so many sources. We know things as your leadership knows things about your employees that they don't even know. What do they like to do? How do they flock together? What's important to them? What do they like about a community? What's the livability like? So the fact that we can go to all these data sources and pull this data makes us better educated. And when you come into a market and we're evaluating those, there's really 2 types of markets you have. You're going to have a build market. So perhaps you don't have a neighboring company within that market, or you don't have the labor supply yet. So you're going to build that market. So you're going to bring and relocate people to that market, or wait for the graduation rates to increase so that you can build that market. The other thing you can do is buy the market. So you're going to go into a market that has some of your competitors in there, or has a university that's producing that skill set you need, and you're going to buy them, right? You're going to take them in and take them off of the market. So there's two ways to go about that. We just did a 1,000-person IT facility in the Southeast recently, and they don't have the employment base. So we're going to build that market. We're going to build that market by relocating people in. And the reason that's important, when you go through that site selection process, some of those factors we're going to look at are going to be different if we're building a market versus buying it. If we're buying it, I'm not as concerned about some of the local crime rates, cost of living, because my employees already live there, so I know they like it, and I know they're going to stay. If I'm building that market, I need to know that all those factors are in there, because I'm going to bring executives in there, and they need to know that they can make a home here. So how do we evaluate that labor component? And I don't know if you can see this very clearly. The goal with this chart really is to show that we take a very scientific approach to that. We're going to model our cost to our availability and skill set. So you have an optimal quadrant, and those are the markets going to have the least risk. So you're getting the highest skilled labor, the best availability for the lowest cost. And this just is a quick chart. The reason I wanted to show this is we talk about the complexity of this analysis, and it's part of what you have in your communities every day, whether you're looking at cost of living, right now, one of the big movements, I've done 10 IT software development facilities in the last 18 months. So tech savvy is a big piece, quality of life, which Williamson County has here. So these are all factors that we look at. And did we look at these 10 years ago? Not necessarily in the detail we do today. But when we're looking at 16 different markets that relatively look the same on paper, we need to take a deeper dive. And the ones with red are risks. So those are ones we're going to figure out, can we mitigate those? And if not, they're going to get eliminated and we're going to move on. So we talk about how things have changed for what our clients are expecting from us. It's no longer, let's go to the webpage, let's pull some data reports, and let's see if we're going to be successful here. Our clients are wanting more and more predictive analytics. So we're very fortunate in our team. We have a PhD who takes a look, especially from the labor supply, and helps us predict, based upon your history within a community, your graduation rates, your existing labor base, what's your market going to look like in 5 to 10 years? Which doesn't seem like that would be possible, but that's what you do every day, and that's what your leadership does, is try to predict that future. So when we're looking to do that, we're looking at things that Matt talked about. We're looking at net in-migration. And there's certain markets that we looked at last year where we have net job loss over a 10-year period. That's not going to be where we're going to put our employees at the end of the day. We're looking at unemployment rates. Unemployment rates are a big factor for us when we're looking at the viability of a community and labor sustainability. Are people coming in, maintaining those jobs and staying? Or are they coming in, looking for that next job and moving on? The other thing that our clients are looking for is flexibility. So especially on the real estate side, and this is true with office and industrial, our clients are wanting to sign 3- and 5-year leases, with options, of course, but they're not going to that 10-year lease right away. And what happens when we start partnering with the state and the locals, everybody wants a 10-year commitment to keep those jobs, that investment here. But that's not what our clients are looking for. The market's still a little uncertain, and they want flexibility to move if they need to. And the same is true with labor. I mentioned the IT work that we've been doing. More and more of my clients are diversifying their labor force up to 50% with contract labor. The reason being that there's so many unique skill sets that they need, they really can't afford to hire these people full time. So they need that contract labor. It takes some of that pressure off their P&L, and it helps them to get the labor they need for a short period of time. But not many states and locals have engaged with them and realized the value that contract labor can be, because it's not the way things are currently measured. And we need to evaluate our focus and figure out that contract labor is just as important as permanent labor when it comes to most companies. And the other thing we spend a lot of time doing is benchmarking. Headlines kill us every day. There's always a headline about company X creating so many jobs, receiving 10 million from the state, and I have to dive in and figure out, well, is that number real? My client wants to know why they're not getting it. And so we spend a lot of time going back and forth and begging newspapers, please don't print the headlines because those aren't true, and now I got to go spend my time to argue against that. So once again, with this supply of data we have, we're just inundated with so much, and we have to pull it down as effectively as possible. So what I wanted to show here, I just talked about what things are changing for our clients, and I know this is a little difficult to see at the bottom, but the column on the left, that's the same chart I reviewed with you, so that's the 2014 data. So I went back to 2007, which is on the right, and that's the order of importance from those CEOs and CFOs as far as what's important to them. Highway accessibility, I guess, has always been important, people getting to and from the facility, being able to see it, marketing. What's really interesting to me, as I pointed out in 2014, to see that available land and available buildings ranking so high, whereas in 2007, they were more concerned about labor cost. So I'm sure there's a lot of scientific reasons why those ranked the way they did, but we have seen a change in those. You see corporate tax rate currently at number 10, and it had far more importance back in 2007. And we're seeing some of those tax components from a corporate perspective not being as important as they used to be, because we're really focused about those ongoing labor costs, real estate cost, and for our industrial clients, the transportation costs, which are 15 to 20% of their P&L at the end of the day. So I thought that was an interesting comparison. So from a local perspective, we've seen communities get more and more involved. It used to be when we had a client in a market, we didn't know where we were going. We didn't have access to the local data. So we'd go right away to the state or to TVA and say, we need to be somewhere in Tennessee. And they would pull the data and give it to us and tell us where we need to go. And then we would engage with the locals. Now we have access to that data. So when we do engage with the state, we say, we need to be in Williamson County. We've already reached out to Matt and the team, and here's what we need. Part of the reason that we think that trend is shifting from the state to the locals quicker than it used to is the states want you to have more control. So legislatively in states all across the country, states are giving more authority to the locals to have some say on how they tax business, whether it's property tax, inventory tax, tax on utilities, for example. States are expecting more of a match when it comes to the incentive piece, which I know is not the biggest driver for site selection, at least on the long list. States want to make sure the locals have skin in the game. So they're expecting you to get more involved. And many communities are starting to make a shift from head count or from investment benefits to headcount investment, because we're taking existing space a lot of time. We're not spending a lot of money on the real estate, but we're still bringing a lot of high-paid jobs. So some of the trends that we've seen the monetization of property and sales tax relief to help fund pre-vertical construction. Like I just said, moving from capital investment-based incentives to headcount-based. Local communities taking an ownership position in the real estate so that we can mitigate some of those construction costs and have a positive effect on the lease rate. We've seen more and more use of federal funds, CDBG funds, new markets tax credits to help mitigate those construction costs, and more of a focus on regional business attraction. So it's no longer City A and City B, it's the region trying to attract business. And so I've listed just some examples, some local trends, and how local communities have positively impacted some of these business decisions. So just in summary, every time a company comes into your market, they are looking to mitigate risk. And the easier you can make it on them to mitigate those risks, whether it's on the P&L side, the timing side, the labor side, is going to have a very positive impact to making sure that that company makes it to your community. And as we've saw in 2014, we'll see how long this trend continues. There's more and more focus on the real estate side, which is always interesting to us because even though I work for a real estate firm, that's not the biggest part of the company's P&L. But with so much competitiveness in the market, they want to make sure that they have options on the real estate side, that they have existing product to take at the end of the day. And once again, I think organizations like this are going to continue to be the trend, because it's all about local development and focusing regionally and figuring out how, if one community succeeds, all communities succeed. And with that, I'll take any questions.
So this is on. This is the Oprah part of the presentation. Amy, we'll do sitting here for a few minutes. Great information, great stuff. Want to dive a little deeper into some of the things you talked about. You know, it was clear from your presentation that this process of site location has become more and more scientific, no doubt. And you have access to data that you didn't have before, which I think is really why we put so much emphasis on getting great stuff on our website, too. So if everybody's had a chance to go there, you can see how much data we've got on there, specifically for the audience of site location consultants like you. But talk a little bit, because ultimately at the end of the day, they're human beings making these decisions, right? So talk to me about what is the most impactful to your clients that is the least scientific when it comes to making an ultimate decision on where to locate?
Sure. So interesting enough, you can do all the desktop analysis you want, but at the end of the day, the client's not going to make a decision until they've stepped foot in your community. And it really is, do they feel, we're going to talk about feelings for a minute.
Well, we're in a great location to do it.
Do they feel that they can be successful, and are they coming into a community where their counterparts are successful? If you have businesses that are failing and closing up shop, what makes you any different from them, right? So it really comes down to community feel and the success that you have in your schools. And that's, at the end of the day, probably when you have 2 or 3 markets that are exactly the same, it's going to be that trip, that fam tour, that trip that the community makes to understand if they're going to be a good fit here.
And what are the most effective ways you've seen communities structure that tour and those conversations with your clients?
One of the most disappointing things for me, because every time I bring a company into a community, it is a reflection on my ability to get a good meeting set. So when we go into some communities, and you'd be very surprised, I can bring a corporate headquarters company to a community, and I can say, we need to have some labor interviews, anonymous, with some of your existing businesses. And the list of businesses we get are people that maybe have only been there for a couple months, they don't have any history, or it's a facility that's on decline, and you have to say you've got to have better existing businesses. So it's really that. It's those champions in your community that can speak to how you become successful. So the worst thing you can do is to not pair that new company coming in with a successful company in your community.
I think that's a really great point, and that's why we put so much emphasis on our existing business program and getting to know our existing clients, because you can see what effect it has when recruiting new companies to the area. That level and depth of relationship really plays when we have these conversations with you and your clients. Yep. So what kind of things are the companies looking for in those employer interviews, or the ones that are set more successfully in the communities you work?
Exactly the same things that we had on that chart. It's the labor sustainability, it's the education, and it's a question, do your employees show up when they're supposed to? What's your turnover like? What are expectations when it comes to wages? So it's really gauging, with all those data points we gathered, is that really what business is like? Does the desktop match the on-the-ground interview? And when you have that match, then it's an easy answer. When you see those discrepancies, that's when you have to question the validity of the data, and it raises some red flags.
Right. Without naming the community, do you have some really great horror stories you want to share?
just a quick, so.
Please.
I was with a client up in Indianapolis, and he.
You can say the city if you want to.
Well, no, that's where he's from.
Oh,
that's where he's
okay,
from.
All right.
He was in the Northwest trying to get zoning approved, and there was an issue between the firemen and the city council, and a fist fight broke out.
That's, who won?
The firemen.
Firemen?
Yeah.
You should never get in a fist fight with the firemen. Just, if you take nothing away from today, take that. You never get in a fist fight with the firemen.
And the reason I meant, we do that, right? When we want to get an incentive passed or zoning passed, we go to those city council meetings, and our clients come in tow, and we've been there where there's been heated debates, and there's clear discrepancy among leadership, and so it needs to be a healthy process all the way through.
Good. So you talked a little bit in the start about mitigating employment risk, because that's really what these projects are all about. What are some effective ways communities can show this, or maybe the most effective ways communities can show that this is going to be a very low risk, high return area for your client if you if you choose to locate here.
Sure. So it comes down to the data, the ability to show that we have some of that net in migration. Because, you know, when we did the Under Armour deal, it's not that we were moving into, which is in Mount Juliet, it's not that we were moving into community where we were going to be the only distribution facility up there. I mean, you're surrounded by Amazon and some of those big. So we needed to make sure that, yeah, the market's good now, but what about the next 5 DCs that you bring down the road? Are you going to be able to sustain that labor force? And so we spent a lot of time looking at that net in migration and how the community is growing and what that means. So we did a lot of predictive analytics when it came to that. One of the markets we ended up eliminating, interestingly enough, when we did the helicopter aerial tour of the markets that we were going to evaluate, there was one community where the client's biggest concern was, I don't see any rooftops. Where are my employees going to live? I'm going to hire 1,500 people. I don't see any rooftops. So that either means they were going to commute in from such a far distance that my labor rates are probably going to have to go up. So once again, getting that feel that this community can actually sustain what I want to accomplish and then have room left over for my next people that are going to come in, because I don't want them coming in and buying the market, right? I don't want them coming and buying my employees at the end of the day.
Right, and I think that underscores how important this transportation issue that I touched on earlier is to the entire region, right? I mean, when you have congestion, what you do is you limit the labor pool that a company can draw from, especially if they come in and they can't physically see rooftops at that point. So it's a great point, Amy. Let me go back to one of the first things you kind of talked and ended with about the site selection factors from 14 and 2007. In your experience in Williamson County's primary targets are corporate, regional, international headquarters, information technology, more the service side. Sure. What do you see are the most important factors for headquarters? What matters more on that list for those kind of projects?
Yeah. So typically with the headquarters, we are building the market. We're bringing our existing workforce into a certain degree, right? We don't want to lose that skill set, that knowledge base we have. So unlike some of the other type of facilities we do, and I know Matt doesn't care for this, but I do a lot of industrial work.
It's not that I don't care, we just don't, there's plenty of industrial sites in Middle Tennessee.
We don't work a lot on that together, but we do work on the corporate headquarters side, and it's a completely different focus because that's where the benefits come in, where I have a market where I can bring in 200 people if I need to, and they're going to thrive and be very successful here in the market. So transportation is a big, because they need to know where they're going to live compared to the facility and how long is it going to take me to commute back and forth.
Okay. So. In addition to fistfights between elected officials, what's the most common thing you've seen kill a deal?
Time. Really interesting. You know, we tend to go into a project, let's just say we're going to do a build-a-suit, that there's going to be land really anywhere we want. We make that generalization. But what happens sometimes is we get into communities, they tend to be smaller communities where they have 4 or 5 tracks that they have to assemble, and they guarantee us they can get it done. But oh, by the way, that's 4 or 5 different owners, and one of them's going to hold out, and next thing you know, we're 3 or 4 months behind. We've got construction issues. We're going to go to our backup plan because this real estate deal has been so hard to assemble that we have no confidence we can get it done in time. Yeah. So that time kills all deals.
Well, I think something that maybe we don't appreciate from your side and the interaction you have with your clients, it's one thing for us to say, oh yeah, come on, it'll be fine. But until you have the assurances that it will be, and you know the ownership, you have the infrastructure in place, it's just not the reality as fast as the timeline is. And talk about how fast the timeline is now compared to how it used to be, and the hurry up and wait component of what you do.
Some of our largest manufacturing projects, we're closing in 10 months, 9 to 10 months, which is absurd. It's so much work because, once again, with so many data points, we are looking at so many markets from the start. We're not picking 5 markets and starting. We're starting with 10, 15 markets and scaling those down because we have so much data that we can gather. And to be able to start with that many markets and narrow it down and make an announcement in 10 months is pretty amazing, considering, as you know, all the analysis that you have to go through, which transportation or labor or zoning or all of that. That's a lot, which is one of the reasons we're so successful in some communities when we can identify a lead for all of those items and to have a community that has an expert in all of those, because it takes a team to get it done that fast. And I don't know that we've had a deal that's gone longer than 12 months in the last couple years to close.
Wow, that's amazing. That is a big difference. So you kind of touched on it. How important is it in your experience to see local elected officials work together and be on the same page?
It's huge, and it's it's interesting. We get to do this a lot, so we get to meet a lot of wonderful people, and we very much appreciate when leadership steps in, but to a meeting and takes interest in a project. But for our clients, when the leadership steps in, you might as well have the president walk in, because they're so amazed that somebody with that type of authority would take time from their day to come meet with them when they don't even know if that company is coming yet. And it goes a really long way. So we talk about getting the feel for community. That's one of the best ways to make a company feel like they can be successful, when you have some of your leadership who have so many things to do during the day, and they take that time to come in and introduce themselves. And I had one mayor give a potential client his cell phone number. I said, you don't even know if this client's coming, and you just gave him your cell phone number. So it went a long way. It meant a lot to them.
Was it his actual cell phone number?
It was.
Or somebody else's? Okay.
We called it, yes.
Because I've been there before. Yeah, so I know that all too well. All right, let me finish up with one final conversation. What's the one thing that you want a community to better understand as they're working a project from your side? Because sometimes we think that you make these incredible demands upon us, but we don't have the appreciation of the demands that are placed upon you. So what's one thing that you want us to better understand as you're getting to that point where you're working with the client that you're eventually going to locate their headquarters in Williamson County?
Typically, by the time we get engaged with you, we've been working with this company for 4 or 5 months, so we know either the difficulties that we have in gathering the data that you need, or we know how quickly or unquickly they move. So when we come in with a last minute request, it's usually because we know that it's going to take us so long on our end to get it through the process and get it through the line, that's why we put unreasonable expectations, because we know that we've got a lot of work to do in order to even get it through their system. And so a lot of times we're at the mercy of the uniqueness of the decision-making skills that our clients have.
Great. Thank you. Well, please join me in thanking Amy for her presentation today, taking questions. Now is the point we'll have a 15-minute break, and please reassemble back at 9 o'clock for the next panel presentation. Thank you.